Tonight on First Tuesday.
Have you ever put a boy on a machine before that is ESN? And he said no. I said, well, if it's never been done, I beg of you now, do it. Give it a try. He said no.
Life and death decisions in the National Health Service. And on New York's 3rd Avenue, we meet a Sioux Indian, a pair of car thieves, and a Bowery bum.
You realize who I am? An eccentric millionaire. I can't get to the bank.
Hello and welcome to this August edition of First Tuesday. We begin tonight with a subject that will surely cause much discussion and dispute. It's one of those things that you may have heard about vaguely before, but it's a matter of life and death. That's a crude but accurate way of putting it. Life and death for some thousands of people in this country. The issue is brought into even sharper focus now by the bitter debate about the future of the National Health Service. A lottery for life is the title Dr. Miriam Stoppard has given to this report.
It's 13 years now since coal miner Gerald Davies walked the hills above his South Wales home, shattered by what he'd just been told.
I wanted to run away. I wanted to get up, walk out of the house and keep going. I didn't want to look back. I didn't want to come back. I just wanted to go away from what was facing me.
Facing him, the reality that his only son was doomed to die.
You know, I was stunned now. I was knocked right back. I felt that we were being crucified. There didn't seem to be any reason for my son to die. None whatsoever. There was a treatment available for him. And he just wasn't going to get it.
His son Alan was 19 at the time. His kidneys had failed completely and only a kidney machine could save him. But with more patients than machines, the doctors were proposing to let Alan die so that someone else could live. And so it would have been, had not his father, devastated by the prospect, decided to fight. Backed by his GP in the village of Glencorrug, Gerald Davies travelled to Cardiff to plead with the kidney specialist for his son's life.
I pleaded his case. I told him, the only way you can say, it's our son, it's our only son, it was our only child. And his loss, what has life got old then for us if we lost him, is it? And his doctor turned around and said, well, they decided to put Alan on a machine. And then he outlined what our role would be in his future treatment with the machine, but we just grabbed at it gratefully.
For the past 13 years, life in the Davies household has revolved around the ritual of putting Alan onto his kidney machine. 3 times a week, every week, Gerald and his wife Winnie connected their son in the back room of their terraced home. After 8 hours on the machine, Alan's blood will be sufficiently cleansed of poisons to allow him to carry on living. Without it, he'd die within a few days, a few weeks at most. The power of the machine is awesome. What then about the power of the doctor who decided on appeal to let Alan live and some other person die?
You've got a group of people, groups rather, of people, social workers, doctors and medical people from different walks, sitting down together, looking through a list of renal failure cases at this hospital, that hospital, case maybe, and they say, you live, you die, you die, you die, you live, you die. And this is basically, you know, this is simple what I'm saying now, but this is basically it. You know, judge, jury, executioner.
13 years after Alan's case, doctors still find themselves cast in that godlike role. Here at Manchester Royal Infirmary, this committee meets once a fortnight. Made up of doctors, nurses and social workers, its job is to choose which patients will get the treatment they need to stay alive. Among the cases today, a man in his mid-50s is the biggest problem.
And so if you're going to be able to offer him anything, it's going to be maintenance hemodialysis. But he has other problems as well. I think on maintenance hemodialysis, he'll still have the problem of the fluid diet, even alcohol abuse, which has been
The man's case is a tricky one, and the treatment he needs is maintenance hemodialysis, a place on a kidney machine in the hospital itself where staff can supervise his treatment.
At the moment, he's just being looked after by his wife. And the way things are going at the moment, we don't have any places on maintenance, which is what he needs.
There's no place.
And, you know, we're reaching a phase in these high-risk patients where at some stage we've got to decide whether we are causing more harm by treating him than good. And I think Mr. Jones is reaching that phase where we probably end up having to decide, well, no treatment.
The thing we can offer, I think that's what
That's probably it is, that's right. Yes.
I think there is regrettably only so much we can do. So I think we just have to accept we've done what we can for him, and that his treatment will have to come to an end.
Without treatment, the man will die. The head of the renal unit, Dr. Netta Malik, accepts responsibility for such decisions without relish.
It's obviously more than difficult, and I don't think anybody could conceal that. We have introduced our own system of very wide consultation to make quite certain that any of the decision, though it must finally, of course, be taken by the doctor, is taken only after the greatest possible consideration to eliminate any bias or area of oversight. But in the end, that decision has to be taken, and it has to be taken because the facilities are restricted by resource allocation. We have not been given the money to do the job.
Do you find it an uncomfortable position to be in?
I find it sometimes an enraging position to be in. It's not the way I would wish to practice medicine, which is a doctor and his individual patient, and the one doing the best for the other. And to be in a position other than that, and particularly when I don't see the necessity to be in that sort of position, I find quite unacceptable. It's recognized in our region that we have very few facilities. We're virtually the worst region in civilized Europe, taking this part of Europe as being civilized, for management of this sort of disease.
Well, why is it? I mean, it sounds as though we're in the dark ages still when other European countries can do it. I believe we're somewhere near 20th in the league of European countries for treating.
Well, that must mean there are only 20 countries in the league, because we are at the bottom. I'm not able to give you the answer, though I've thought about it and been involved in the field for over 15 years. I think something has simply gone wrong with our system, and the NHS is not, as a bureaucratic organisation, capable of righting an obvious wrong like this quickly and efficiently.
Life on a kidney machine is not particularly pleasant, but these patients are nevertheless the lucky ones. For Britain is indeed below almost every other West European country in the number of kidney patients it treats. And it is machines like these which, despite new treatments and despite kidney transplants, ultimately stand between patients and death. Around 7,000 people, despite a normal lifestyle, go into terminal kidney failure in this country each year. Some will become hospital outpatients in a unit like this, and others will have machines installed at home. For many, there's the chance of a transplant and a new life. But at least half the people who would benefit from treatment won't get it at all. Most of them never even reach a specialist kidney unit. They are, in the chilling jargon of the trade, deselected for treatment. Prime candidates for deselection are the elderly, the poor, immigrants, and those thought to have low intelligence, as well as patients with other serious medical conditions, especially in the Midlands and parts of the north of England. Patients who get deselected are generally told, there's nothing more we can do for you, or your case isn't suitable for treatment. Here in the Greater Manchester area, that happens to 2 out of every 3 people who go into terminal kidney failure. Most of them last only a few days, or a few weeks, or a few months, before succumbing to the poisons that are building up in their bodies. Very few ever find out that they could get treatment if the will and the wherewithal existed. So the only witnesses who survive are those who have an inkling of what's happening and go to another doctor for a second opinion. Such is the haphazard nature of things that patients are often taken on by a second doctor after being turned down by a first. And in many cases, they're alive to tell the tale years later. At 21, Stephen Smith has had a kidney transplant and is on the lookout for a job in his hometown of Bradford. Yet 6 years ago, and without even an examination by a kidney specialist, he was dying in a hospital ward when his mother asked to speak to the doctor.
And I just asked what could be done. He just said nothing. He will have to stay on this special diet for as long as he can live. So I said, well, why can't anything be done, you see? So he said, well, is a lot of I said, it's kidney trouble. He said, yes, but there's a lot of other complications, which I knew in my own mind that he hadn't. It was kidney trouble, full stop. So I asked him if anything at all could be done. I was prepared to fight for it and go to any lengths. As part of for selling everything up I had and giving the money, it was Stephen's. I went so far, but I won't fight for it. So he just turned around to me and he said, well, is it worth it? So I said, yes, I think it's worth it. You can't just throw a 15-year-old on the scrap heap. That's your future generation. How many more have had to go the same way? They are worth fighting for. He said, yes, because it's your son. I said, no, anybody's son or daughter. They're worth fighting for.
Stephen is alive today because his parents did fight. They persuaded the doctor at least to telephone local kidney units to try to get him in. A phone call to Leeds Infirmary, just 10 miles away, saved his life.
They put him on dialysis at tea time that day, and it was on all through the night, and the next morning he was sat up in bed eating a normal breakfast that he hadn't had for a fortnight.
You just could not credit seeing a lad going on a trolley, absolutely dead, expecting him to be dead next morning. It was so near that I'd already seen the undertaker. I didn't think it had lasted the afternoon. As I say, he's 21 now and fit as a fiddle.
Yeah. You're mine, aren't you? All
Yeah.
mine.
Mrs. Emma Caffrey from Oldham was 61 when her kidneys failed.
Hiya. Are you all right?
Yes,
That's
thanks.
good.
Just been up to the shops.
Very good.
Despite a lifetime of paying into the health service, there were no plans to treat her, and she'd never have left Oldham Hospital alive had her son Brian not confronted her consultant.
I asked him what was wrong with her. It's a total renal failure. I asked if she'd seen a renal specialist, and he said no. And I asked him why. He said because she's over the age of 60, but she was then 61 going on 62. I asked if he would refer her down to Manchester Renal Unit, and he said no. I asked him then point blank. I said, so what you are telling me is that my mother is going to, you are going to allow my mother to die? And his reply again was just yes.
What do you think about the way he made the decision to let your mother die?
At the time, I wondered where he got his powers from. Who gave him this power of life and death? Because it was his decision. It wasn't an area decision, which I found out later. It wasn't his superior's decision. He told me at the time that it was his decision. He placed that power upon himself.
Mrs. Caffrey is still able to see her grandchildren grow up because her son refused to accept the doctor's decision. He turned to the family GP, who managed to get her into a renal unit at Manchester Royal Infirmary. Mrs. Caffrey is now kept alive by dialysis.
Things on the floor. And it fell over him.
I wonder how many people in the past have not taken it as far as we did, perhaps pushed a little bit farther, perhaps gone to their own GP and pushed for the treatment. I just wonder how many people have died because of that reason, that he has made that decision. And a lot of people will accept a doctor's, especially a consultant's decision, that there is nothing else that can be done.
No one could accuse Cyril and Mary Worthington from Wigan of meekly accepting the doctor's decision. They fought tooth and nail to get their son Philip dialyzed. But Philip was educationally subnormal, ESN, and that, it seemed, put him beyond treatment.
Oh, well, that was it, because he was taking, he was taking a machine that a young man or woman with a family would need more than Philip.
That was the only excuse?
That was the excuse.
Just because he was slow?
Because he was slow, which to my thinking was that, well, you know, that's it. He's nothing.
The main hospital in Wigan had no kidney unit, and Philip's parents had to fight to get a specialist even to visit him. But eventually one did.
And he had about 20 minutes with Philip, and he said he was a very sick boy, and the best thing to do was to let him die with dignity.
How did you take that news?
Oh, I couldn't believe it. I mean, after trying for all these weeks to get a specialist to see him, and knowing that, you know, feeling in our own hearts that something could have been done early on, and then he said, let him die with dignity. We just sat there in the room, and I said, I just can't understand it. Why can't you treat him? He said, because he cannot be put on a machine. But I said, why? He said, because he can't, he wouldn't know anything about it. He wouldn't know what to do. He wouldn't have the sense. I said, ridiculous. No, absolutely ridiculous. I said, what I want to do, I said, I beg of you as a mother, we both beg of you as parents, to give him a chance. I said, have you ever put a boy on a machine before that is ESN? And he said, no. I said, well, if it's never been done, I beg of you now, do it. Give it a try. And he said, no. I'm giving you the advice that I would give if it was my own brother. And that is it. He said, and I don't want you to keep on about it, Mrs. Worthington. He said, I want you to let it lie now. Leave it, let it go.
We said to him, they said he couldn't do a job. He'd never be able to work. He's worked all his life, all his working life he's worked. He pays national insurance, he pays tax, like anybody else. Why? 21 years old, a bonny lad. Why can't? No, well, I can't. Just let him die with it. If it was my own brother, he said, I would do the same thing. I said, it's all right saying that now. Or if it was your own brother, I think you would put him on. But he still wouldn't.
The Worthingtons campaigned in public to keep their son alive, and suddenly there was hope. A Liverpool surgeon agreed to transplant a kidney from Mrs. Worthington to her son. Even so, she was told that should the transplant fail, there would still be no machine for Philip. The operation was not a success.
He came home just before Christmas, you say. But he was terribly ill, terribly ill.
Yes, they let him come home for a day at Christmas. And funny enough, I had the feeling when they were taking him back at Boxing Day that this was it. I said to his dad, I said, this is it. I said, they'll take that kidney out this week. And he said, oh, no, you're imagining things. I said, no, I can feel it. I said,
Couldn't believe it, you see, because we knew it was getting near the time, and we thought, even the other patients in the ward where he was, in the renal unit, said, you've cracked it now. Nobody can just take his kidney out and just say, they can save him, but they're not going to do. All he needs to do is go on a machine. But they're not, no, nobody can do that. But they did. They did it. They died in that night, about 7 hours after. Never regained consciousness or anything, did.
Just for a second to look at you.
Mm. That's what my last words, even though I couldn't hear me, I said, I can do nothing more for you, lad. No.
The failure to treat kidney patients is not because of a shortage of machines. There is, however, a national shortage of hospital units able to dialyse the patients who can't do it themselves. But there are also enormous regional differences in a patient's chance of being treated. Professor Stuart Cameron of Guy's Hospital in London is outraged by the contrasts.
Well, we're not treating roughly in the South East Thames area, which is the one we're primarily responsible for, about 2.5 times what the national average is. But this still falls far, far short of what's out there. We reckon we could probably double that again, and we would probably be getting somewhere near treating everybody who needs it. I suspect at that point we would be reaching all of the people who could benefit. And this does bring up the whole question that finally there has to be some decision-taking on who should be treated and who shouldn't. We've seen in the United States what happens when absolutely everybody is treated. And I'm not suggesting that we should be treating people who are 90 years old, are blind, have diabetes, a stroke, and have lost both legs from gangrene. I mean, there are times when it is a kindness not to treat, and there is a medical decision to be made about this in conjunction with the family and with the patient, if it's possible to involve them. And that's part of the physician's responsibility, and I don't think we should duck that. Nobody wants to treat everybody, but I do think the line should be drawn way, way, way beyond where it is, as far as age especially is concerned in the UK.
When you say that you're treating 2.5 times as many patients in your area as the national average, what implications does that have for patients in the worst areas?
I don't know how many times more than the worst areas that we're treating, but it's probably something of the order of 8 or maybe even 10 times, certainly 8. There was a report in the British Medical Journal last year which created something of a scandal, which suggested in some parts of the country, particularly in the Midlands, for example, where the services until very recently were perhaps the most inadequate in the whole of the United Kingdom, people were being turned down because their command of English was poor. They were thought to be difficult people to deal with because they were diabetics, even though they were 20, 25, 30 or 35 years old. Now, these are totally inadequate reasons for turning anybody down for treatment for chronic renal failure and are perceived as such by every other country in Europe and North America. And that was a big eye-opener, I think, to see actually what was happening in some parts of the country where services are particularly inadequate. These were just excuses, in fact, for the inadequacy of the services. If the services were there, I'm sure none of these patients would have been turned down.
How disturbing do you find it that people who can't speak English aren't being given treatment?
I find it absolutely barbarous. And actually, it's probably illegal. But that's another problem.
Yet not all doctors take such a liberal view. There are disturbing disagreements within the medical profession about which patients are worth keeping alive. And if you get turned down by Professor Harry Lee of St Mary's Hospital in Portsmouth, it's not because he hasn't got the facilities to treat you.
We still have some spare capacity. I mean, every renal unit should be open 7 days a week and 7 nights a week until you say that is full. In our situation, we've got something like 30% spare capacity, so we can still take on more. We'll need some more staff, admittedly, but we've got the space and the machinery.
Well, if you have spare capacity, does that still mean that you would turn down the same patients, even though they could be treated?
Oh, absolutely, because spare capacity has got nothing to do with decision-making about the quality of life I can offer for the given individual with end-stage renal failure. So there will still be many patients, even in utopia. I would never dream of putting on a kidney machine, because it would be totally irresponsible of me to do so. It would be the wrong treatment.
Can you give me some examples of the kind of patients you turn down?
There may be some extreme psychosocial problems I sometimes come across where you have an individual, no family support whatsoever, has no permanent abode, has a very poor mentality, his hygiene rating is very poor, would not be able to cope with hemodialysis on a purely intellectual basis, and for them, I feel quite honestly, it would be a road to disaster. It is useless in my way that doctors should feel we must never say no, always say yes, because you just might be right. If that's the attitude, all our hospitals will be full to overflowing. Those people who can really do something good and worthwhile will be deprived. Now, they certainly will be deprived because you are making 101 slack decisions, because you're frightened of the emotional reaction of the public, of the person, of a family. I don't believe that's on.
Such extremes of opinion among doctors mean it can be simply a matter of chance whether many patients survive chronic kidney failure at all. 12-year-old Tina Maslin has now had a transplant and has put behind her the month she lay untreated in a hospital. Tina's alive today simply because her mother happened to hear of this woman, Mrs. Elizabeth Ward.
That's right, and she wouldn't be here today, splashing around.
From her home in Hampshire, Mrs. Ward runs the British Kidney Patient Association, a medical charity much like any other, up to a point. But it's also been a lifeline for several people in danger of losing out in the Kidney Patients Lottery for Life.
In this lottery, a lot of patients who come to you have come up against a brick wall. How do you get them treated?
Well, now, this is a problem because I haven't got enough people around, renal physicians who are full of compassion and understanding and have facilities who are able to help. There aren't enough, but there are a few, and always they will pick up the pieces of the people that I bring to them. The doctors who say, but if he can smile at me and if he wants to live, how can I deny him? And they will always find the money. That is the interesting point. They will always find the money to treat them. Those people are given just as little funds as everybody else or just as much. But they will say, I am going to treat this patient. I'm going to give him a chance. And that's how I am able to help, by just spreading them out amongst these caring, very special people.
But Mrs. Ward has few words of praise for some of the less compassionate doctors she's come across.
Do you know, a doctor said to me one day when I was inquiring as to why this particular patient was not going to be treated, he said, you know, he was in awful trouble in the unit when he was on dialysis. His transplant had recently failed, and he wasn't going to be taken back onto dialysis to wait another turn. He said, you've no idea. I mean, he made a fuss over taking his pills. He wouldn't stick to his diet. So he decided that he wasn't going to keep him alive. This is a completely novel thinking amongst doctors within any area of medicine. This is unique. I mean, think of the millions of pounds worth of drugs that are forced almost down the resisting throats or unresisting throats of terminal cancer patients, where their consultants are trying to extend their life for maybe 3 or 4 months. They know they're going to die. It doesn't enter their heads to stop treating them. They just don't think like that. Look at the millions of pounds which we're paying in this country on keeping alive, looking after, physically looking after, patients people who have never known night from day, who have never been able to recognize their own parents, who don't know their names, who have no quality of life at all, who are really just a terrible tragedy and a burden to everybody. It doesn't enter anybody's heads to kill them. Our patients are actually being murdered. I mean, there really is no other way of saying that. It's true. It's an awful thing to say, but I must say it because it's true.
Whatever the words used to describe it, the fact is that chronic kidney failure is the only area of British medicine where a tried and tested treatment is deliberately being withheld from patients who will die unless they get it.
Well, that was Miriam Stoppard's report, which obviously raises a host of ethical, financial and political questions. Could we spend more so that some of those that now die might live? Should the decision to let you live or die depend merely on where you happen to live or who the doctor is? These were the questions that we wanted to put to the government. So 2 weeks ago we asked the Department of Health and Social Security if one of their ministers would come on the programme. Unfortunately, it appears that none of them's available, although we have been given a statement from Mr. Norman Fowler's department, which includes the following points. Ministers are aware that the facilities currently available for the treatment of end-stage renal failure are not sufficient to treat the estimated number of patients who might benefit, and this is a matter that causes deep concern. The difficulty is that the need for health services is almost infinite. It's felt that it would be wrong for any one group of patients to be singled out centrally for priority treatment. But the All-Party Committee on Disablement takes a rather different view. Just before the election, its members declared that the situation was a scandal requiring urgent and drastic action. In a moment, we'll be hearing from the chairman of that group, Jack Ashley. But first, Professor Stuart Cameron, who we saw in that film. Professor Cameron, it's clear to me that what you were saying in that film, amongst other things, was that you are no longer making medical, clinical judgments, but essentially financial and social judgments about whether people should live or die. Now, doesn't that go way beyond the responsibility that ought to be yours?
I think it does. The problem is no longer a medical one, it is a political one. The ethical problem really can be solved by injection of cash. And certainly we, as doctors, are being placed in a totally impossible position, making the sort of decisions at whatever level of success we think we can make them. And you saw that opinions differ amongst different doctors as to where the line should be drawn. I don't see this as our role to switch people off, to deny them treatment. It is, as Mrs. Ward said, murder. It's death by neglect, and it's organised neglect in this country, government-sponsored.
Given the present limitation of resources, because of the alarming difference between yourself, for instance, and Dr. Lee, shouldn't there be some national guidelines so that potential patients know at least what the criteria are, which are going to determine whether they will or won't get treatment?
That's a difficult one, because immediately I think a lot of doctors are going to say you're taking away their individual ability to judge whether they should treat or not treat a patient.
But these are social judgments that are being made. They're
These are
whether
social
they have
judgments.
quality of life, whether one patient is worth more than another, essentially.
I would think that some sort of government guidelines along the lines of the general statements made in, for example, brain death recently wouldn't be a bad idea. How one could make them bind in different areas and with different doctors, though, I'm not sure.
How much money would you need in order to provide the kind of service that wouldn't put you into these kinds of ethical dilemma?
Well, one would need to double the present amount of cash that's being spent on kidney failure in the UK, which is about 50 million, and we'd need about 100. It's a small amount of money in national terms, although it sounds a lot in terms of our housekeeping budgets.
The government, of course, says that not one group of patients should be singled out in a period of restraint from any other group of patients. Why should kidney patients, in that sense, be singled out from other patients?
Well, first, I think that we grossly underfund the National Health Service, but that, again, is a national political decision. But even within the available money, I think a special case can be made for kidney patients, as Mrs. Ward did in the film. These patients, these people, they're not patients, they're human beings leading enjoyable lives, we hope, are dying. And there's a lot of difference between death and disability or discomfort. For example, somebody waiting longer for a new hip, who doesn't have a hip replacement that they need, or an old person in inadequate geriatric care. There is a real qualitative difference between that sort of a problem and the problem of life and death, which is what these patients face.
How many people a year now, in your terms, are in effect being murdered as a result of the failure to treat?
At least 2,000, probably 3,000.
Professor Cameron, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Jack Ashley, down in London, you've heard what Professor Cameron said. Your group has described it as a scandal. Is there any chance in the real world of government restraint today of doing anything about that scandal?
Well, I think there is a chance, providing people support the campaign mentioned by Professor Cameron to try to get more resources. But doctors, all doctors, and the public and patients must combine together with members of Parliament to say that this scandal, and it is a grave national scandal, of at least 2,000 people dying unnecessarily every year must end. And it's only when sufficient pressure is brought to bear upon the government that anything will be done. Without pressure, nothing will be done. With it, a great deal can be accomplished.
Now, you know the enormous pressure there is already on the facilities of the National Health Service. Would you welcome resources being taken from one area in order to satisfy the needs of kidney patients, even if that meant some other areas suffering?
Well, first of all, I would welcome that transfer of resources, because we are dealing with a matter of life and death. And every person who dies because of lack of kidney treatment who can benefit is an unnecessary death. And that is shocking. But that's not my main point. My main point would be, rather than transfer resources, we should seek to give more resources from the government. You see, Norman Fowler's line, and I'm not surprised he was frightened to accept your invitation, Norman Fowler's line that you can't select one group is quite bogus, because every time I put a point to Norman Fowler or Kenneth Clark, they always give that answer. Whoever you try to help, they say, well, we can't use special groups, and thereby no groups are assisted. The real answer is to fund kidney patients properly.
The ministers, of course, said that they couldn't do it. They didn't refuse in that sense that you implied, so far as we know. Would you welcome some kind of national inquiry to establish publicly precisely what is wrong and precisely what is needed, in a word?
Well, I think this is a vital next step. I think that this kind of an inquiry would be a prelude to bombarding the government with an authoritative case. So far, they've refused to accept it, but the government should remember that there is no act of Parliament which says that anybody, whether immigrant or poor or whatever, should be deprived of National Health Service facilities. Everyone has a right to those facilities, and so an inquiry would show the need for implementing those rights and making sure that everyone who needed kidney treatment would get it.
Jack Ashley, thank you very much. And there, in this programme at least, we leave that disturbing topic. Jane.
Well, you may remember that last month we showed a rather unusual film about New York. Its subject was lowlife in the city, and it was made by one man working alone with his own video camera on 3rd Avenue. Well, tonight, courtesy of that same camera, we're going back to New York to meet a pair of car thieves, a down-and-out, and a Red Indian. We follow them to prison, to church, and to a Sioux Indian reservation. A junkyard for car parts in Brooklyn. Sonny is the boss.
I've been in it practically all my life. Yeah. And there's always the demand on parts. It's very good money in it. And don't let nobody baloney you. It's good money in it. When I see a car coming in here, I think of money, fast money. Of course. What do you mean, really? Did you see me take off that stupid front? Yeah. And that's a 68 Buick. I'll get $150 for that front. Yeah? Sure. I didn't pay nothing for the car. But why should you know that as the customer? You know what I mean? Why should you know that? This is my son, Eddie. He started working when he was about 14 years old, 15 years old after school. And this is my son-in-law, Michael, down here. He's been working with me for about 4 years.
The money's right here, you know what I mean? You don't have to go to college for 20 years and learn to become something and then hope to make money.
I wanted a home, and I wanted a new car, and I wanted this and that, where my father he could never afford these things. Money. Thank you.
I come from a working class family, and all my friends, most of them are working class, except the criminal ones that aren't working class. But most of the working class, none of them really ever made it rich. What does a working class person come up with $20,000, $30,000?
2 years salary for a middle class person, $30,000.
What does a guy, if a guy goes to work and makes $150, what does he got left to save? $50, $30? I don't know, I'm the type of person who always wants more. I said sometimes you get to the point where you don't get what you got to do to get it. You know, you just want it, one way or the other.
You can't do the time, don't do the crime.
The brothers are prepared to chance doing time for one particular crime.
All right, fellas, catch you in the AM. You gotta go take care of the PM.
They take care of the PM by stealing cars.
We'll make more money tonight than we did all week. Say you get $200, $300 a car. You go out, you get 2 cars. You make $500, $600. You work all week for $150, right?
And look at all this money just sitting here. Piles of it. Sitting on wheels.
It don't even pay, man.
Piles of money rolling around on rubber. There's a Monte Carlo. What do you say we grab the Monte and let's book it for the night?
It's getting late.
Watch this, Ed. We're going to be finished in a minute and we're going home, baby.
Make sure it's got air conditioning.
Watch. $15 seconds. No time at all.
One night a car theft, next day Eddie's at a christening.
What name do you give to your child?
Edward.
What do you ask of God's church for your child? All right, please. Now, if you're not going to cooperate, I'll ask you to go home. What do you think we gave you the book for?
Baby's born with mortal sin on his soul or something like that. And when he's baptized, it takes it away. Who knows? I forgot. I'm too old to remember.
This over here is my house, and I worked hard, and, you know, it's the house that I could say like I always wanted.
Yeah.
This place compared to where I grew up is like a mansion. It's like comparing the White House, you know, to something, you know. I grew up in a 4-room apartment. Over here, it's like, forget about it.
I enjoy it, you know. I enjoy having a nice house. I enjoy living here, you know. But it's just, you know, I do feel bad because, you know, Eddie did have to do the things he did to get it.
I was accused of stealing a car. They caught in a stolen car. So.
Eddie's luck has run out. His car thefts have landed him with a 3-month prison sentence.
You know, people like me and other guys that are in here are considered crooks because we do it on a smaller scale. You know, if you rob petty, you're considered a criminal, a crook. If you rob $1 million, then, oh, yeah, that's a good guy, you know what I mean? He robbed $1 million. He's a smart guy, you know. The only reason I don't rob $1 million is because I haven't found out where they keep $1 million to rob, you know?
Hey, do you realize who I am? An eccentric millionaire. I can't get to the bank. My chauffeur's drunk. He took off with the limousine. He left me down here. Imagine this. Now, hey, truthfully, I'm not as rich as I look. The truth is, I'm short 25 cents for another bottle. What do you say? I got it?
I had 14 amateur fights. This is the truth. This is the truth. 14 amateur fights. They want to turn me pro. I was goddamn. I was good at that time then.
You couldn't box oranges.
In New York, alcoholics traditionally congregate in the Bowery.
Mister, can you help me out with a nickel? Please.
Joe Bonville is a Bowery bum, panhandling for change on 3rd Avenue.
I've been on the Bowery 6 years. I get drunk every day. Wish I'm a little bit sober today, but you should see me sometime. I can't stop drinking. I'm going to have another drink. Well, that's just where he's going to go.
If you want to
Give me a can of beer.
Parole violation is all we have.
Oh, you broke now?
No.
Oh, broke. Right. Hey, you must have been out panhandling all night long. You must have got one of the toll booths. How come you drink so much?
I'm an alcoholic.
You're an alcoholic. Before you told me you stopped drinking.
No, not me. I'll never stop.
Yeah? This guy, you got this guy's record beat. He's bitching to me before. He says he sent his wife out. Cigarettes.
No, I went out for a pack of cigarettes.
You went out for cigarettes.
And I never came back.
Oh, that was 3 years ago.
No, it took 11 years before I came back.
So I says, what's those 11 years? I just want to send him out for a loaf of bread. 25, how many years ago?
Over 30 years now, my friend, and it ain't no goddamn bullshit. She told me to go buy a loaf of bread. I said, sure, fine. I went to California, Washington, Oregon, and I've been gone for 30 years, and I ain't found her yet. You ain't come back yet.
Despite the joke, Joe wants to get back together with his wife. After 11 years, he's going home.
I don't know where the hell you've been. I don't know nothing. I don't know. I've been in peace since you've been the hell away from here.
You been in peace?
You better believe it. I get along very well. Don't worry.
I don't. No.
You're full of baloney. You're a goddamn liar. You want to start something now?
No.
I'll put you right in the mouth right now. For real.
Oh!
God punished you. See what you got? He made you fall. And you broke your goddamn hip. See that? You left me on my goddamn back, right? Right? Go out for a pack of cigarettes and you don't show up no more. Get the hell out of here. You stayed away 10 years? Stay away another 10 years.
Okay.
I was just getting a divorce, for God's sakes. I was
Well,
going to marry Lester.
Lester?
Yes, sir.
Holy Christ. You'd be in bad shape. Lester? Oh, come on.
He's all right.
He's a nut. He's worse than I am.
You know, at least the bum works.
What are you going to do? You're going to stop. This is it. It's up today. Because I have plans. I've got plans to make. I think everything will come out good.
Well, I'm looking in your eyes, and your eyes are telling me that you're not going to be able to stop.
Oh, yes. It's going to work. I know. I got willpower. I can do it. I remind you of the Bahari.
I thought you were stopping, Joe.
Stop tomorrow. Today's the last day.
Joe Kilswright is a Sioux Indian from South Dakota. He's come to New York looking for work, but in 6 months he's found none.
This is where all the Indian people stay. It's where a lot of brothers and sisters come together. They got no place else to go. Jeannie's the one that started the whole thing.
This is the Native American survival house. When our people come to the city, this is where we stay. Sometimes hundreds of Indians. A lot of transits from out west come here.
Our people back home, they don't even know we're going through this. My family doesn't know I'm going through this. And this is where I stayed, right here.
So I miss my ex-wife. I miss the girl I was supposed to marry. I miss my son. I miss my mom and dad. I miss my brothers and sisters back home. I miss my land. It's still America, but I'm a stranger in a strange land because I wasn't born in this type of society or situation. I'm a stranger in a strange land because I know it. And people treat me that way and talk to me that way and act that way to me.
That's an Indian here. That's a wig? Oh.
Do you know what an Indian is, really?
Yeah. Indian, that's on television.
That's an Indian.
Yeah. What you doing here anyway?
Right now, what am I doing here? I'm surviving like the rest of you people.
But for Joe, survival in New York has led to heroin addiction. He supports his habit by robbing other junkies.
I went out and jacked this dude up, you know. Boom! I know you got it, man. I need it now, or I'm gonna gut you, man. So that's cool, that's cool. Crushed it up, we cooked it up. And I went back up. I know when I'm turning into a junkie, man, because I'm starting to have the symptoms again. And these symptoms are telling me, hey, kid, you're turning into a junkie again. Remember what happened last time?
I remember what happened.
You're gonna die this time. I woke up with a lot of bad memories this morning.
Yeah, me too. You gotta get away from here.
Joe needs help, but without papers, the hospital won't treat him. He'll have to save himself.
I gotta detox myself.
Yeah? How are you going to do that?
I'm gonna walk. Yeah, I'm just gonna keep walking.
Joe's long walk helps him kick the habit. He gets fit enough to return home to his reservation in South Dakota.
You know, it's a big change from New York. It's beautiful. This is the north side of the reservation. We do a lot of, horseback riding or just exploring the area around here. I grew up in this area. 16,000
Indians live here. Alcoholism is rife. the unemployment rate is 60%, which is why Joe left his home and family in the first place.
It's all right, it's all right.
To celebrate his return, a powwow is held. At his family's request, Joe is received back into the Christian church.
In the name of Jesus, and anoint Joe. And we pray and rebuke every works of Satan from him.
As well as Christianity, Joe finds comfort in the company of his young son and in his Indian heritage.
We're going to go up on that hill up there, and that's the hill that I chose, you know, for me personally, where I can pray, meditate, sing a few songs, just empty out all the negativeness in me.
Reunited with his child, he heads for his favorite spot. He's found breathing space far from the pressures of 3rd Avenue. But for Joe Kilswright, the future is uncertain. Joe Kilswright in the Black Hills of Dakota, which brings us to the end of this month's program.
But we'll be back again next month, and I hope you join us then on the first Tuesday in September for September's First Tuesday. Until then, good night.